So tonight we're going to talk about garden harvest calendar, or how to scheduling your harvesting. So a little background about myself. My name is Andy West. I'm the horticulture educator here in Twin Falls County. I'm one of a few of us in the state that are full-time horticulture educators. And so I deal with a lot of the questions that come in around the state and help people with a lot of answers. My background, I spent the first 20 plus years of my career in different aspects of the horticulture industry. I did some landscape maintenance, design, build, greenhouse production, dabbled in a little floriculture as a florist and flower design. So kind of even done some native plant work. And so I've got kind of a really broad background, but I've been growing a garden since as long as I can remember. And so we're going to talk about kind of how to, kind of a basic calendar on when to harvest and plan things out to schedule your harvest. Okay, so the overview is we're going to look at what to expect. There's different things to expect when you're trying to put a calendar together on when to schedule, and then how to plan for those fluctuations and expectations, and then a list of resources to help you get the correct information that you need. So that's what we'll cover in this presentation tonight. So first thing, what to expect. You can expect that we live in Idaho. We deal with weather fluctuations. We deal with a number of different zones. We have extreme weather. Some years we have a really late spring and we can have frost through the end of June. Depending on where you're at, you could have frost into July. We get some extreme weather that come through, whether it's a extreme thunderstorm, snowstorm, hailstorm, really hot weather like we're going to be experiencing this week, or really cold weather. And then our fall frosts is the same as our spring. They fluctuate every year. And so we could have an early fall frost, we could have a late fall frost. So your growing season can be affected by a number of different factors. And also what the weather does, it affects when your fruit is actually going to be ripened or your produce is going to ripen. And so all of these things make it difficult to say, well, here's the calendar. So this week you're going to harvest this week you're going to harvest this. It's not that easy. We have to learn to expect that with the way our weather is, that things change from year to year, and the weather does funny things throughout the year. And so it's not just cut and dry. You can't just put a calendar together, okay, this is when I do this. If you want to have a really fun experience, start tracking it. I do a garden journal. And so each year, put the year at the top. I've got it in a notebook, and put the year at the top. I write down, okay, here's what I'm planting this year. Here's when I planted it. The seeds indoors, so I could transplant it outside by this date. I record what the weather does. I record when I harvest, how much I got out of it. And going back over the years, you can see that these things fluctuate. It can be up to 6 weeks between the time that the one year I harvested my peas at this time, the next year could be up to 6 weeks later in the year, just because of the way the weather was. We had a cool spring that lasted forever, and so the peas just hung on forever. Instead of having our normal where we've got this cool spring and then all of a sudden we go straight to summer and the peas hurry up and finish real quick. And so learning that there's not a cut and dry calendar to just what you can do when. So how do you plan for this? Well, you have to start watching the weather forecasts. You have to be observant to what's going on, and you have to plan accordingly, because sometimes you may have to adjust a couple of weeks here and there. You need to be in your garden regularly so you know what these plants are doing, how they're growing. Are they getting close? Do you need to check them a couple of times a day? You need to know your crops. How do you know when that is fully ripe and ready to harvest? And so you can pick it at the peak, and then be prepared to harvest at a moment's notice, because sometimes you may have a hailstorm that's going to come through, or an early frost, and be prepared to harvest at a moment's notice, or be prepared to protect those plants if it's just going to be a minor frost. And so you have to be able to plan ahead of time to be prepared to do these things. But the key thing is to watch the weather, be in your garden regularly, and know what you're growing and when the peak time is. And I will give you some links to some resources that are really good for knowing the peak times to harvest most of our vegetable crops that we grow. So these resources that are available out there, your extension office. The extension office can help you. If they don't know the answers, they know somebody that can help them get the answers or point them in the right direction. Master gardeners are a good resource, but the big resource is university publications. You can find lots of university publications from universities all over across the United States and other countries. But what you want to do is find those publications that are similar to your growing climate. What they're doing back east with vegetables and the issues that they may be dealing with or their harvest times aren't the same that we have here, because we're dealing with two totally different climates. And so when you're looking for those university resources, look for those in your area, and they will point you to the right information. The resources that I use the University of Idaho's extension website for their publications, and also Utah State University Extension, their publications, because they're really similar to ours. Our growing climates are really similar, and so there's a lot of crossover in using those publications, vice versa. So one of the really good resources is Chapter 21 in the Master Gardener Handbook. And so anybody can access this online. You can go to the University of Idaho Extension, click on program areas, Gardens and Landscapes, or Horticulture and Small Farms. You click on that, and then you can click on Master Gardener, and then there's a link for handbook, and you can actually scroll down on that. When you click on that handbook link, you can scroll down and just look at chapter 21 of that handbook. You can even download it and print it off if you'd like. But this is what this one is, and it gives you the information on growing these vegetable crops all the way through harvest, and what to look for problems, and also what to look for to know that you can harvest them at the key time to get the best produce. Another good resource is this bulletin 617, Harvesting and Storing Fresh Garden Vegetables. This publication was put together 20 years ago. There's a group of us that are in the process of revising and updating this publication. So hopefully in the next 6 months, to a year, we should have an updated version of this publication coming out, but it gives you even a little bit more information than the Master Gardener Handbook does on these vegetables. Excuse me. Another good resource to go to is the University of Idaho Extension webpage. You can click on the program areas, then Horticulture and Small Farms, and then it'll bring up this list here. And you can click on the Idaho Landscapes and Gardens. And if you click on that Fruit, Vegetables, and Herbs tab, it will give you lots of information. You can search by the vegetable or the fruit or the herb that you want to know more information about. And so it's another good resource to be able to find information about growing fruits and vegetables. Here's a link to one of the Utah State University Extension web pages on harvesting and storage of fruits and vegetables, and they have a wealth of information. You can actually search by vegetable or fruit, and they've got a fact sheet that goes with each one of those that'll give you a lot of information on how to properly grow those and also harvest them and even store them. So lots and lots of information there from their website. Okay, that's all that I have for this presentation. It's kind of short and sweet, to the point, being able to link you to the right resources and get you the right information that you need so you can get the answers to the questions that you may have about growing fruits and vegetables and harvesting them at the right time. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me. And so I've got my contact information on this slide. I just had one of my master gardeners contact me about he's having issues with growing his cantaloupe and some watermelon and some of his pumpkins. And he's like, I did a Google search looking for information on it. And he's like, this web page told me that I need to do it this way. And then the next website that I looked at told me that I don't want to do it the way that I just read, that I want to do it this way. He's like, how do I get the right information? And he's like, I watched all these videos, and one was telling me I needed to do 10-10-10 fertilizer. One was telling me I needed to do a 0-32-9. He's like, everybody's got their own opinion. He's like, so how do you get the right information? I'm like, so I was putting this presentation, kind of reviewing this presentation at the same time and updating some information. And so I'm like, here's the links to get the correct information. So I sent him the same links that I've got in this presentation. So you can get region-specific information that has been proven through the university system, through the research there. And so that's the benefit of going through the extension office and those extension publications is they're based on the research. And so they've got the track record of proving, okay, this is what this does. So if you need additional information or have any questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I can point you in the right direction and get you the right information that you're looking for. But with these resources I've given you, it should give you probably 90+% of all the vegetables and fruits that you would grow. There is a publication or link to information from the University of Idaho's website or Utah State University Extension website. So with that, thank you very much, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stop that video, and I will stop sharing my screen. That was really quick class, but we do have Ron and Jared on here to answer any of your gardening questions that you may have. So let's start with, like, if you guys had any questions regarding that presentation. I'm going to go ahead and find that vegetable guide that he was talking about, and I'll attach that in the chat. Ron and Jared, are you guys on? Oh, I see Jared.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So I'll just turn it over to you guys, and I'm going to go find that publication and attach it for everybody.
Anybody have any questions on the topic of the presentation, scheduling your garden and things like that?
One of the things and Andy talked about harvesting at the right time, but then also there's a question about storage that wasn't covered in this presentation, and different crops require different storage. Some you want to have in cold storage, which means below 38 degrees, usually about 35 to 38 degrees. And then some of them you want to be in cool storage, which is 38 to 42, 45. And then some in warm storage, which is above 45 degrees and sometimes even above 55 degrees. And so in addition to harvesting at the right time, you also need to be thinking about storage at the, proper storage conditions. Some of them require humid storage and some require a dry storage. For example, squash, your winter squash, once it's cured, you want to be storing that about 55 to 60 degrees in dry conditions. And dry meaning below 80 degrees humidity.
80%?
Yeah, 80, that's right. Yeah, 80% humidity. So yeah, so that's one of those things to also think about when you're doing the harvesting. Hi, Anthony. See if I can turn off I got Anthony Simmerling, right? Anthony Simmerling with me. I can't get the video to work, but he's horticulture educator in Howard County. Okay, can you still hear me, Jared?
Yeah.
Okay, now you can hear me. Anyway, Anthony's here too. We just got finished with a presentation from Andy West about harvesting the summer gardening calendar. And so, what to harvest when. And I saw Evelyn had a question on there. What can you plant now? You can plant anything that has a fairly short season. Right now, the things I would worry about planting right now, if you didn't get things planted, it would be, you could actually plant peas now for fall harvest. We could do carrots. You can plant carrots now if you can keep the grasshoppers and bugs from eating the seedlings as they pop up. That's the challenge I usually have with summer planting, is getting them past those very herbivorous insects that really like to eat the seedlings. But things what you'd want to avoid, probably it's too late for tomatoes and peppers and sweet corn and potatoes and bulbing onions and Brussels sprouts. You probably, if you plant broccoli now, should be able to get a crop of broccoli off in the fall. And so there's a number of things you could plant. I would wait for the really cool season stuff like radishes and spinach and lettuce. I would wait until later, in August, start planting those, and you can do succession planting. It's just too hot for those, and they got a really short season. Arugula the same way. Arugula is about like radish, is about a 28-day window to when it's ready to start harvesting. It's really a fun one to plant and grow. I don't know if you've ever grown arugula, Anthony. Anyway, what's your ideas on that, Jared? What do you think they could be planting now?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you covered what I was thinking about. I was going to say I lost my first round seeding of carrots this year to grasshoppers, so I might try and get another batch of them in. You might be able to get some summer squash, or do you think you'd have enough time?
Yeah,
for the
summer squash probably work pretty good. When I was down in Price, we figured, if you could get the carrots planted by the end of July, then probably be pretty good. But that's pushing it. And here we're just a little bit shorter season than Price, and so I would carrots and summer squash, and bush beans. You can plant those. You can plant those now. They got a pretty short window. Some of your shorter season cucumbers, you get some cucumbers off those if you get them planted right away.
Especially some of your smaller ones if you're doing them for small pickles or something.
Yeah. So that's trying to think of other things you could plant now. I mean, with the cold season and being busy and all that kind of stuff, I was kind of late getting my corn is up and going, and my potatoes are up and going, but I was actually probably about 2 to 3 weeks late on it. But it really looked like I was smart because I missed the frost.
Frost, 1st of June.
Yeah, so
around here.
Every time I'm really slow like that, it makes me look really smart because I missed that late June, the middle of June frost. So
is it too late for sunflowers?
Yeah.
Maybe, depends on.
I don't need seeds or anything. I just promised a little girl we'd plant them, and then I forgot. Yeah.
I've been thinking, I've got a place where I wanted to plant some in my yard, and I just haven't got to it yet.
You could probably get, if they were for the flowers, you picked a smaller.
If it's not the big mammoth. Sunflower, but those really colorful, have the smaller, not the wild sunflower, but the smaller, very colorful sunflowers.
I think what I got was called like Van Gogh or something, and they're more like the 4 to 6 inch across heads. So with the reds and oranges. So
I think you're kind of pushing it, but probably.
Okay, we'll go put seeds out after class tonight.
Yep.
When I get home from this in-service, I'll go plant some sunflowers. Gonna be gone next week too. So anyway, let's see. Was there anything else? Anything else in the chat?
Oh, what about flowers? What flowers could you start right now? Because I don't know what I've got eating everything. I haven't seen grasshoppers, but like all of my zinnias are just stems now. They've just been decimated. So are there any like annual flowers that I could seed out and get anything to happen at this point, or is it just way too late?
From seed?
Yeah. Well, garden centers don't have anything left. So
probably some of your smaller marigolds.
So I wondered about that. I have a little marigold mix.
Yeah. The bigger marigolds may be a little bit late for some of those.
You could get snapdragons seeded for the fall.
Okay, I do have snapdragons blooming right now, and I usually let them drop their seeds, but yeah, they're one of the only things that haven't been eaten alive is the snapdragons. They haven't touched those. My coreopsis, my coneflowers. I don't know what it is. Something feeding at night because I can't find them.
Some long-legged flies down there. And
See if she can.
yeah, you might want to see what it is that's out there, Lena, is a sticky card, or you could put a margarine container with some with a little bit of soy sauce in there and water and a drop or two of dish soap. And
Okay.
they climb into that and they drown. You know, kind of bury it so that the lid is pretty, or the lip of the container is pretty close to the soil surface. And
Okay.
they go right for it. They like that soy sauce smell. I find that to be about as good as anything.
Okay.
Or tuna fish, the water oil from tuna fish will also do the same thing. I mean, anything that smells real strong, earwigs go for it. So you can see if there's earwigs that might be doing it, or go out at nighttime.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was peeking after the fireworks and stuff on the 4th of July. That was pretty late at nighttime. But you also can't see as well that late. So
Yeah, it's getting a little bit late for this. It's almost time to start thinking about ordering bulbs for next spring, kind of a thing, for flowers. I'm not a big flower person. Of course, y'all know that, but let's see other things as far as planting goes. Now, okay, so what problems have we had coming into the office? What have you had coming to your office, Anthony? Just that spruce tree was one thing.
Spruce had some apple drop off of some apple trees.
It's probably a June drop then, or something.
Well, that's what I thought, but he said he didn't, with the amount that he said drop. I went out and looked, and I think that he has been spraying some homemade pesticide, insecticide, and I'm not sure if any of his fruits. I'm not sure if his apples actually got pollinated that he's getting.
And if you get worms in your apples, they'll drop.
Yeah, I looked. He brought in like 20 of them, and I cut open
No
a whole
worms
bunch,
in?
and there was no worms in any of them.
Yeah.
But I was hoping.
But you get kind of a natural drop depending on how heavy the fruit load is and everything.
Yeah.
Usually it's about the middle of June, but this year it would have been later because it's been so
Well, he
cold.
just didn't have, and he hasn't fertilized really anything. So some of his had a little bit of leaf iron deficiency.
Oh,
in
okay.
some of his leaves, but
Well,
and you ruled out neighborhood kids playing farmer or potion class?
Yeah.
I've had that happen in my house before, just saying.
well, the leaves didn't look like they had any type of herbicide damage on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you look at the irrigation too in that situation?
Well, he had grass underneath his trees, and the grass is fine. Everything else, like he had, the rest of his yard looked fine. They were just getting water from the sprinklers, but like all of his trees kind of looked a little like
Just-
sadder, I guess. He had 3 apples.
I think we must have
Did we
lost
lose
them.
them?
Yeah, maybe. We've had a lot of apples, actually. I've had quite a few questions last week too, but the ones that I've got have more been spots on the leaves and things like that. A couple different ones that looked fungal. So one was really kind of made the leaf kind of balloon out. It kind of looked like a deflated balloon and was bright red on spots.
Okay.
So, oh, maybe they're back.
yeah, we've always been able to hear you. Did you stop hearing us?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there
we
was
stopped
just
hearing you for a
minute
while.
there that we didn't hear you.
Okay, well maybe my phone went to sleep because the screen disappeared, but we can still hear you.
Oh,
I was just saying that I think we had some hail damage out there. Have been part of it too. But
yeah, we had some. It was short, but a pretty significant hailstorm here in Rexburg maybe a week ago now that did some minor damage, mostly to some of my apple leaves and hostas. Knocked some holes through some things there, but
So I had a guy call, maybe it was yesterday. Anyway, I went to look at his junipers yesterday. He called and says, something's happening with my junipers, and he went to the nursery and they said, well, it's probably a fungus, and so they sold him some fungicide. And he put that on there and he says this isn't helping, and said, well, let me stop by. So I stopped by yesterday on my way home, and what he's got, this is the thing about trees, they don't tell you they've got a problem until a year or two down the road. And what he had was, he's got this year's growth looked really good, and looks like last year's growth was probably really good, but something happened about 2 years ago that killed a lot of the new growth. It didn't show up brown until this year. Last year it was probably just kind of a pale green. And then this year that tissue showed up dead. So it's 2 years down the road, the tree's saying, I had a problem. And then you've got to say, okay, when did it happen? And looking at it, he's got plenty, the plants look plenty healthy. And so I didn't see any reason to be applying anything onto them, just kind of break off those old brown stems. And so that they don't look quite so bad. And I think those plants will recover just fine. So you have to be aware sometimes when you have that damage, look at a pattern. I looked at another yard, same kind of a thing, only it was on spruce trees. You could see that current year growth looked really good. The year before that looked good. And then 2 years ago there was something that happened that those trees all along inside the branches that far in looked bad. And then beyond that, everything looked good. And so there was that 1 year when those needles looked kind of sad. Something happened that year. Now, what happened, I don't know. It could have been that most of this happened when we had that really cold weather 2 years ago. And so we saw some damage from that. And now the trees are just expressing that damage. And so, you look for patterns when that happens.
For sure.
What other things have we had coming in, Lena?
I had that one I showed you, emailed you, Ron, on apples again, the blister mites.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I got that under my stereoscope and found them right away. So I'm gonna be looking at that fellow's yard here on Friday to see how bad they really are, if it's just cosmetic. But he says it's been
it's
getting
usually,
worse the past couple
usually it's
years.
just cosmetic. But if they're spraying, what happens? There's a lot of things that will go after those blister mites, a lot of predatory mites and things like that that will help to keep them under control. And so if you're spraying for things, you get some unintended consequences. And so it may be a spray program that is encouraging or wiping out the predators and allowing those blister mites to come in and take advantage of it, the situation.
Kind of
So
thinking
that's a possibility, but yeah.
He didn't, at least it wasn't as bad. It wasn't bad enough to notice until a couple of years ago, and then it's gradually gotten worse. So I'm sure there aren't any predators or very low levels. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. So ask him about his bug control, insect control program. That's why I kind of hesitate to tell people we'll start spraying for codling moth, because a lot of times what they spray for codling moth opens them up for spider mite problems in the hot part of the summer.
Yeah.
Because spider mites like it hot and dry, and you've wiped out all the predators, and so the spider mite problems come in. And so you have to be careful with that. And that's why I don't spray my fruit trees. I bag my apples. And so
I did have a guy ask about insecticide to use on his roses.
So
that wouldn't impact like the bee populations, I guess.
Bees don't usually visit roses very much, but unless they're the single flower type roses,
like the hybrid teas. Yeah, and they have a English garden there. That's
yeah. And so
with a lot of other plants.
What you're talking about. If it's aphids, usually it's aphids.
Yeah.
Just take a hose and spray them off on the bottom side. At least just spray it real stiff water. Yeah, just knock them off. And by the time they if they can find their way back to the rose plant, the ground beetles and whatnot have eaten them up. So that's the softest approach if you want to do that. And that way it's not going to knock out those predators. Will recover from that fine, but the aphids are really slow. And so, I mean, you have to do it every day for a couple of weeks, but it really, you're just knocking off the old pests. So yeah, I hesitate to spray for bugs just because, again, you spray, there's some unintended consequences. And so not that I say I'm never going to spray, because sometimes I do, but that's the last thing I do.
We did have a columbine come in today.
Oh.
And it was in pretty tough shape, which surprised me because they seem to be one of the least desirable things in my yard to insects that are after them. But Vicky and I looked at it for a while, and in the end, I think we decided that it had grasshoppers, soft flies, mites, and something else all feeding on it, because it had, very different feeding patterns on different parts of it. Anyway, So that one was a disaster.
Yeah, my column. Good.
It was growing under a tree or something.
Yeah, under spruce tree, and then I got some columbines and some heuchera and hostas. I think I've got my astilbes planted too far into the shade. They're not look like they want to produce any flowers, so I may have them too shady. Might have to move my astilbe. But the lilies have been nice. I've decided I really like lilies as cut flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got these white lilies from Lena, and they're kind of about to hit the end of their peak bloom, and so I'm not gonna get a whole lot more flowers out of them. But I don't, Lena, do you pull the stamens off from yours when you bring them in?
I don't usually because I don't want them to last very.
Oh.
I'm a little bit allergic to those ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
I just heard somebody say that, somebody that produces cut flowers. Well, maybe they know what they're talking about. It wasn't a university publication or anything, but I pull those stamens off and they just last for a long time. Seem to do really well.
that's
And they're
good.
easy to pull off. So
I've never pulled them off my Asiatic lilies when I bring those ones in the house, and they seem to last for like a good 2 weeks anyway. So
yeah, maybe it's
yeah,
just lily. I guess what I should do is harvest two of them and pull the stamens off one and not off the other and see if
yeah,
one of them lasts longer than the other.
I know
See if
some
she just
flowers will do that once they get pollinated, they start going downhill pretty quick because they did their job.
yeah.
So
But I don't think these, I mean, maybe those that were first open, but those that are opening inside the house, they're not going to get pollinated. There's nothing pulling because the stigma sticks out way past the anther,
that's true. Maybe
past the stamen. So
you haven't seen all the fungus gnats in my house. It could happen. Or noses going from one flower to another to smell another.
maybe that's it. Yeah.
If anybody wants the white Easter lilies, they are, yeah, they came with my house and I love them, but holy cow, every time I move them, they just have babies and babies and babies. So, like right next to them, they're not pestiferous or anything. They're probably about 5 feet tall and get what, 6 or 8 white blooms on each stalk.
Yeah.
Very, very perfumey.
Yep. Yeah. They're really nice. And I've got them in a
Very
couple.
hardy. I have some in full shade and some on the south side of my brick house, and they seem to tolerate anything. So
And I got some around my 9 bark and some over there behind the lilacs and yeah.
it'd be pretty with 9 bark and dark leaf 9 bark.
No, it's a native seeded 9
Oh.
bark. It's 9 bark, but yeah, that El Diablo 9 bark, that'd be a good
Yeah,
variation.
that'd be a really striking pairing with those.
Yeah,
I
except
have some with
mine
my,
are green. Mine are lighter green.
say I have some with my really deep magenta foxgloves, and they're a very pretty combination too.
Yeah, and I found that penstemons are really good cut flower too.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
tall penstemons. That
Used
Palmer
it a few
penstemon was
times.
really good.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're getting into the season when things are starting to get to your summer slump with the flowers. So my cosmos are blooming now, so that's good because they like to bloom in the hot summer, so that'll be good.
Just got my lavender in full bloom right now, so that kind of gets me into the
Oh yeah.
hot part of the
What
season.
lavender are you growing way up there? Because I can't
I-
keep it alive at my house in almost Blackfoot.
Really? I've got just the Munstead strain of English lavender. I also have a hybrid French lavender that I put in last year that came through the winter just fine. I think that's a proven winner's variety. I can't remember it right now. It might come to me. Superb or something. I can't remember. Anyway, I've got the tag somewhere. I could look it up if you want. But yeah, if you want some, Lena, we always have. I never get to deadheading everything right on time, so I've always got a few seedlings coming up in our yard. So I've got some
Yes, I would love
darts
that.
if you want to try some.
Maybe I'm putting it in the wrong spot. I thought it loved sun, so I've been putting it in a full
Yeah.
sun bed. But the one that's in a bed that gets shade, probably from about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon through the rest of the day. That's the only one that has survived out of 5 that I've planted in my yard in various places. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess come to think of it, most of mine the house ends up shading them late in the afternoon, but I mean, they're in full sun, fairly rocky. So, I mean, I've got a clay loam, but from, the neighborhood, them building the houses and stuff, there's quite a bit of rock in
Yeah.
too. So that front area is definitely pretty rocky, gravelly too. They should do fine in that once they get established.
Well, I have a decent silty loam, but I do have a lot of rocks too. I'm about a mile off the Snake River, so there's rocks everywhere.
Yeah, you should be able to get them. We'll have to talk and see what the detail is that's missing.
Okay. Yeah, well, and maybe I just don't have enough wind protection too.
Maybe if they're exposed in the wintertime and don't have a snow cover on them, that could.
Yeah, at least 3 of them were right where I shovel the snow off my sidewalk and my porch, right onto that flower bed to kind of keep it insulated. So yeah, I don't know. I love growing lavender in Cache Valley. And I mean, you could plant any kind you wanted there, and I'm only half a zone colder here, so it's been frustrating.
Is there a recommended shade cloth percentage? I'm in Meridian. We've got our temps obviously above 100 every day. And my yard is south facing, so it gets sun all day long. I did buy some 40% shade cloth. Is that?
That's probably a little bit,
Vegetables or
Yes. Tomatoes and
Okay.
peppers.
that's probably a little bit heavy. I mean, it'll probably do okay, but you're going to cut your yield somewhat with that heavy of a shade. The recommendation is a 20 to 30% shade cloth. Research back east has indicated that a 35% shade cloth would cut your yields back quite a bit. So I put 20% shade cloth on my stuff, and it does a lot to keep things cooled down. Yeah. So 40%, you probably would get it to work, especially there. If you're full sun all day long, you're probably okay. You're just not going to get as much photosynthesis happening because of the shade. So
Okay.
the
I
plant,
might just do the 40% for a couple weeks. Just my plants are really stressed right now, so maybe kind of get them to the lesser
Yeah,
stress
get you.
level and get like a lower percentage, maybe.
yeah, the challenge I've had with the shade cloth is for a couple of years I put the shade cloth over the top of my raspberries because they get sunburned quite bad, and always we get these Northern California and Oregon forest fires and get this heavy cloud haze when my raspberries are trying to produce, and it would kept way back on my yields. So I put up with some sunburned
A little bit
fruit,
of sunburn.
just because I think trying to do a shade cloth and having those fires. I mean, one year I put the shade cloth on, and then when the fires came along, I just went ahead and took the shade cloth off because the fires were doing what I was trying to get the shade cloth to do in the first place.
Oh, I see
I
what you're
was
saying. Gotcha.
just gonna say, I don't know what Meridian's like, but Idaho Falls was pretty hazy today, enough that my nose was burning when I was outside, which I'm really, really sensitive to it. But yeah, so it's coming.
We don't really have anything just yet as far as like bad, but I'm sure we'll get it over here. We do every year, so
Yeah. Yeah, you get that jet stream from Northern California come up over western Idaho, and a lot of years it comes all the way over to eastern Idaho too. So
thank you.
Yep.
yeah, I got to put shade cloth over my tomatoes and peppers this week. So we can be on next week. So
You have that on drip irrigation?
yeah,
Yeah.
I've got it timed and everything. So they're doing fine. It does get hot, like you said. It's supposed to get up above 100 when this week,
I think it's this week.
tomorrow.
Today.
We hit 100 in Blackfoot today.
Did you? I have no idea how hot.
My car said at least, so I haven't checked the official weather report, but yeah, we're supposed to be like 103, 104 at my house tomorrow. So
Yeah.
Ours started yesterday.
oh, yep. What are
Like
you
the
guys
next
gonna get
10
110 over there?
I think the next 10 days it's supposed to be over 100 and then 99. So I still think that's 100.
Yeah. So Yeah, and the shade cloth, it's amazing how much difference that makes to get underneath that shade cloth as opposed to out in the bright sun. And so it makes it much more comfortable. But really the main reason for the shade cloth is to keep the sun from burning the fruit. So your tomatoes and peppers are most susceptible, and raspberries are really quite susceptible to sunburn or sun scald, as we call it. If you get white under the shoulders of your tomatoes, white in the flesh, below the skin, and it's white in the flesh there, that's a sun scald result. The peppers, it's the darker skinned peppers are more susceptible to it. They just collect that heat and you get the kind of a leathery patch on the side of your peppers. And that's a sun scald issue. And then your raspberries, sometimes it just, the drupelets that are on the sunny side are either a bleached white color, or sometimes they're just like they're almost desiccated, really thin fruit. But so those are some of the things you look at for the sun scald. But like you said, if your plants are really stressed with all this high temperatures, you don't want to overwater, because overwatering is gonna kill your plants just as bad as underwatering. And so be careful about watering too much. But yeah, if you can get them into shade, I'm sure that'll help.
I've started putting my peppers on the east side of my row of trellised tomatoes because I've had bad sunburn the last couple of years, especially on like my poblano peppers or my largest bell peppers. So yeah, they get that little bit of evening shade and it seems to help more.
Yeah, east side trellis tomatoes, something that's tall.
Yeah, I don't grow corn because I have a neighbor that grows it so cheap, but there's no reason to waste space in my yard. So she grows 12 varieties, 2 of which are my favorites. So
thought you were gonna say I don't grow corn because of the raccoons.
well, you say that, and we saw our first raccoon in our yard yesterday, and I had a fox sitting in my front flower bed this morning. So here they come for this year.
Yeah, I don't have
Could smell
raccoon
a skunk
problems.
this morning too.
Yeah,
Oh, be grateful if you don't have raccoon problems.
I don't have raccoon or deer problems, so I'm far enough away from the river that they're not a problem. There's not enough trees to get them up close, so too many houses between my house and the river.
I have a husky that loves everything.
Oh.
That was last year was my first year, and he destroyed everything. I didn't realize he liked every vegetable there is.
Yeah, my dogs used to eat the raspberries and eat the peas. You got
raspberries and cherry tomatoes. That's what my dog gets. You just grow extra for him.
Yep.
I'm fine keeping the dog happy. He keeps all the pests out of the garden for me. So
yeah. Well, yeah, raccoons are really bad with corn. About the time the corn is almost, it's like birds when you're cherries, right?
Yeah, they
almost
know.
ready, and the birds will come and peck them apart. And the raccoons are about the same with your sweet corn. Almost ready. Oh, that's good enough for them. So they just strip your corn plants. So let's see, what other gardening questions have we got?
Had a lot about soil. Starting to get a few questions. Well, here's the thing. I was just thinking this today. The summer squash is a little bit slow this year. At least mine has been compared to the last couple of years. Now we're going to hit 100 degrees for a few days in a row. It's going to be too hot for that pollen to move well. So I'm guessing we're going to get questions about that again, right? Why do I have flowers?
They probably have poor pollination. So most of the pollination for the summer squash actually happens in the morning, usually before 10. And so
so we might be okay.
It might be okay. But yeah, if it's really hot during the day, when the pollen is out, that it gets sticky and it does not move real well. And so that could be an issue, is poor pollination on your squash when it's hot. Besides that,
so is it worth it to go out with like a paintbrush or something at 6 or 7 in the morning and move stuff around?
If you've got male and female flowers open, it probably wouldn't hurt.
Okay. I'll be ready for the questions when they come.
Okay. See if you get really good pollination on all those plants, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just cold this spring. It was all cold through all of June. And it was cold, below 50 degrees almost every night. And so that just slows things way down. Now that the weather's warmed up, if we had a few more days in the 80-degree range, that'd be good. But it starts getting above 80 degrees and the plants, that's just too hot for most of them. Some of the squash plants will do okay, 85, 90 degrees. But above 80, 85 degrees, most of the plants just kind of shut down. So So you'll get growth in the morning, you'll get growth in the evening, but not a whole lot in the middle of the day.
Well, do you want it 85 degrees or over 60 at night?
That's a good question. Well, hopefully it'll be above 50 at night and below 85 during the day. There we go. That would be ideal.
Yeah, it would be.
So where do we go to get that, right?
Nebraska?
Yeah. These next
South
two
Dakota.
these next 2 weeks up in the Teton Basin might work if you want to move your garden up to Teton Basin and move it back down after it gets cold again.
The entire garden plot.
There you go.
Oh, I asked you about my raspberries, and you said I had the raspberry horntail wasp terrible because I did it all wrong last year. You could tell them about that.
So don't do what Lena does.
It was just this year. I ran out of time.
So, and I wrote an article in the Pest Alert newsletter about that, but the raspberry horntail wasp is probably the worst of the cane borers in our area. You do get the cane, the row stem girdler and the cane borer that will both affect your raspberries, but the horntail wasp, it's the one that starts out in the spring. The adults will lay their eggs on the primocane. So when that primocane is growing this year, the wasp larva is tunneling up through that cane, and when it gets to be about 4 feet tall, the tip starts to flag on that cane. So it looks like it's wilting. It's not a lot of water to it. And so those tips will start to flag. And if you've been irrigating properly and those tips are flagging, I am 99% sure what you've got is horntail wasp. And all you've got to do is cut down. You don't have to cut down very far usually. You cut down below the flagging, you cut off that stem and you look at it, and if it's got a yellow where the caterpillar's been crawling up through that, if you see a yellow dot there, then it should be all white. The pith should be all white. So if you see a yellow dot in there, you've got something that's crawled up there. So now you've got it in the tip of the plant, which you've just taken off. You can split that up and find that horntail wasp and kill it. And it's just something therapeutic about cutting those out and killing the horntail wasp. And that'll help reduce the population somewhat. So what Lena did this year was her primocane raspberries, and you can prune primocane raspberries. Those are the ones that the fall bearing raspberries. You can prune them so that they'll produce next year. And I have one of my rows that's actually doing that, and it's producing real well right now. But if you do that, you run the risk, because in the fall, those horntail wasp larvae go back down the stem, and then they survive the winter as a larva down in a cavity at the base of the stem. Then in the spring, they pupate and exit, and they lay their eggs again the next year. So it's on the primocane that they grow before they become floricanes. Floricane is that second year growth. Well, they've exited before they become floricanes. So the primocane raspberries, if you prune them out in the middle of the winter, don't wait until April to prune them out, then you are very likely going to prune out all of those horntail wasp larvae and take care of that, and you don't have a problem. But if you don't, then you run the risk of the horntail wasp adults laying eggs. They hatch out, they produce eggs, they mate, they produce eggs and lay those into that primocane, and then you've got the problem this next year. So I always go through my patch and I'll prune out all those. So hopefully I won't have any going back down the next year, that next fall, that back down to the bottom. And so if I have a row, like I said, I have one row that I kept the floricanes. They're producing really quite well now. I get 2.5, 3 gallons of raspberries a week. And so that works really well to do that. But if you leave them and you haven't pruned out all of those flagging tips, then you're very likely going to have a bunch of adults overwinter and laying eggs on your primocane this year if you don't prune those primocanes from the previous year, if you don't prune those out. With primocanes, you just cut the whole thing down, cut out all of them if you just want to do primocane. So I have one row that I've pruned as everbearing, and then 2 rows that I have that are just primocane. They'll just produce this fall and then prune them out. So anyway.
I'm trying to get a picture to the computer so that I can show what mine looked like with all their flagging.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just gonna say I took all my pictures off because I was getting all the kids, all the videos and pictures of the grandkids is taking up too much space.
Well, I was gonna try and put one on too because not all of mine phenomenal is what I've been trying to grow, Jared. So I had a bunch that flagged and I started cutting those that every one of them had one in it. So I had some that were like kind of a little bit shrivelly and a little bit bronzy, almost looked more deficiency like. So I thought, well, I'm gonna cut a couple of these off, and they had a larva in them too. So
And they can survive that. They'll get distorted canes. They can survive, but your yields will be down. So you don't have to prune them out, but if you do tip them off, you're gonna get rid of all those larvae that are gonna be a problem next year when they become adults.
okay, they just came to my email, so I'll put them in the chat real quick.
Okay. So anyway, it's phenomenal lavender. And
That's
then
the one that talked about with the master gardeners that they bred in Canada for cold weather. But like I said, the ones that have been exposed in my yard have not survived.
Well, I've never been a lavender grower, but not. I suppose if I try it, I can't. Yeah.
How are they? How are you watering those? Like, are they a drip line, or are they just, or like what else is being irrigated with the same water there?
I have a soaker drip, if that makes sense. It's like the
What else do you
fabric-y.
have planted there?
So by one, I had crocosmia, some annual flowers, and a rose bush. By another one, it was between some peonies and some speedwell. The one that is surviving is between coneflowers and, oh my goodness, the huge things, hollyhocks. But that's the one that's got the evening shade and a little bit more wind protection. And then the ones in the back were by irises.
When they're dying, what do they look like? They just dry.
Yeah. I've got one that I could run it and take a picture of, but it's getting late. That it's like a fourth still alive, like 3/4 of it is, it looks burnt. It's just brown and dead. And then the 1/4 of it is happy. So I put those raspberry pictures in. One is of like my whole patch with flagging everywhere, and then there's a closer one of the like bronzing effect that some of them were getting, all with nasty little bugs in their canes.
Yeah, it's not loading. My phone is not loading those up, but yeah. Anyway,
When you say flagging, do you just mean like drooping?
It looks like
Yeah,
a shepherd's
it's
crook.
like
Gotcha. All right.
kind of wilting, like, yep, that's a technical term. Yeah, and sometimes they don't necessarily look flagging. They got marginal necrosis on the leaves, like they just dried up. If you don't catch them right, and it may not be flagging. Flagging is just kind of wilting at the tip, and then sometimes they just show up as a marginal necrosis. Anyway, either one is usually an indication that you've got that horntail wasp.
Here, I can
Okay,
just.
Okay, it came through now, the flagging pictures.
Okay, I can just share it. There you can see
Yeah.
the one right in the middle there is flagging, and then the one off to the left center is also flagging. There's one down here in the
Yeah.
middle that's about to flag. So
Yeah. Yep, that's what it looks like.